Hello, hello, hello. So you guys have to excuse my voice. I'm not accustomed to this cold weather, and it's been a cold winter everywhere, but in Houston it's not quite this cold and we don't get any snow. So I woke up this morning like, wow, like a child in wonder. So I want to begin by having a conversation about literature because I'm a lit girl, right? One of my favorite authors is a writer named Toni Kade Bambara, who is from Harlem and who wrote a lot about Harlem. And she, in contemplating her role as a writer and as a documentarian, commented that the role of the writer is to make revolution irresistible. So it's like my favorite quote in the world. And I use it in everything. I would extend it to include all artists, really, right? And so I use it with my students when I am introducing difficult literature sometimes or revolutionary literature. I use it with them when we are discussing critical thinking and writing critically and analytically to help them have conversations about themselves and the world around them, right? And I use it as motivation for myself when I am working to tell, teach, and archive stories of the people and places that I love very much. And so I'm a storyteller, and I want to tell you a story today of a place that I love very, very much. It is a community in Houston called Third Ward, but for those of us who live there and work there and love it very much, we call it the Tray, right? And so when the city of Houston was founded in 1836, it set up 6 wards that were these sort of political districts, right? And Third Ward, of course, was one of those wards. It was and has been for a long time, or was for a long time, a very cosmopolitan city section. And it included white families and Jewish families eventually, and even some African American families on the northern end, right? Because after emancipation, African American freed slaves migrated from the Brazos River into Houston, and they settled in Fourth Ward, actually, which came to be known as Freedmen's Town, and in some of the northern parts of Third Ward. And so these freed slaves collected money to purchase a plot of land, and this sort of development was led by Minister Jack Yates. And he purchased this land so that they would be able to celebrate emancipation in one place, right? These celebrations went on to be named Juneteenth, right? And this park went on to be named Emancipation Park, and it sits right in Third Ward on Dowling Street. So there's a very rich history there. After World War II, many of the white and Jewish families kind of migrated into other communities. In 1927, actually, a community school for Negroes was opened in Third Ward, and in 1947, it was adopted by the state. It went on to be named Texas Southern University, right? And this opportunity for African Americans to become educated brought many affluent African American families into Third Ward. And it became a wonderful African American community at this point. And even though this was during segregation, you couldn't tell it going through Third Ward, right? It's a beautiful community, and you could ride down Dowling Street, honey, and you could have some fine dining, right? You could do some fashionable shopping, because I love to shop, right? You could also come together and have conversations about these impending civil rights movements, right, that were happening in Houston in hopes to integrate the city and make it more equal for everyone, right? And you could listen to some good blues and jazz music and dance. And on Sundays, you could get you some religion, right? And you could do all of this in a very safe community. And so the community kind of began to change after the civil rights movement with integration, right? We often hear about how integration benefited all communities, but it hurt our communities as well, particularly African American communities, because these pulsating and thriving communities kind of became abandoned because many of these affluent families that were living in Third Ward, particularly at the time, kind of moved into other communities. And, you know, the 70s, there was this whole move for helping the community become self-sustained. And there were plenty of community organizations that were open during that time, and particularly with a lot of artists, like the artist John Biggers, for instance, in Third Ward. And then the 80s came. And what happened in Third Ward in the 80s is what happened in most urban cities in the 80s. The socioeconomic conditions just kind of made the community fall apart. And then there was a crack epidemic that severely impacted the residents of Third Ward. And this was also the time that I was kind of introduced to Third Ward as a kid, right? In middle school. My mother enrolled me at Texas Southern University in a STEM college preparatory program, right? Because, God bless her, she wanted me to be an engineer. If you call her right now, she'll tell you that she still wants me to be an engineer. But my mother was from this generation of African American parents that hoped that their children would be able to transcend poverty through education. You know, my parents were the children of sharecroppers. My grandparents were sharecroppers, and so they wanted me to be able to have a life of work where I could use my brain instead of my hands. You know, they had hopes for my hands, other than that hard work, right? My father and my mother, my father had to drop out of school in about 6th grade to help my widowed grandmother farm. So education was very important for them. And so there I was in Third Ward, in the middle of the 80s, and this sort of diminishing of the community. But my mother really loved Third Ward because it reminded her a lot of the community that her great-grandparents established in Louisiana as freed slaves, much like 4th Ward in Freedmanstown, right? And so Third Ward was where I attended that college prep program. And it is where I went on to attend college. It is where I spoke my first spoken word lines in my hopes of becoming a world-renowned poet, right? That didn't last. It's where I fought against the death penalty for the first time. It is where I became enveloped in an artist community. Today, it is where I teach at the same college that I attended as a child, which is really so rewarding and rich. It is where I am involved in community programming, where I am able to teach narrative writing, this whole idea of telling stories to young children, as well as to adults in the community. It is where I work with some wonderful visual artists, friends of mine, to bring public access to visual art and also creative writing. And it is where I plant my greatest seed. If you look at the community, I send my daughter there. She is in school there and a part of many of the after-school programs there and the summer programs there. So I'm following in the footsteps of my mama and entrusting my daughter to the community. Now, when you think about Third Ward, or if you read about Third Ward, you won't hear that kind of story. And it's not necessarily that my story isn't common, it's just not the one that you hear, because we are inundated with these statistics, right? Like you'll hear that 47% of the residents live below the federal poverty guidelines. You'll hear that less than 45% of the residents have a high school diploma. You'll hear that 35% of the families are led by single moms, that fathers are absent, that despite Third Ward housing, TSU and U of H, 3 out of 5 young men living there will face arrest. 16% of those arrests will be a result of drug charges, right? But I hate statistics. I'm a better storyteller than they are, right? Storytellers have the opportunity of telling more complete stories, and that is what I'm doing in the community. Not only telling stories about the community as I stand in front of you today, but also lending voice to those in the community, because Third Ward is a prime spot, it's a prime location. It is right outside of downtown, it is right down the street from the medical center, and it is facing a lot of redevelopment, right? But we all know that oftentimes in those types of situations and in those types of communities, there's an erasure that happens, right? The residents become ghosts. And so this idea of telling stories is to give voice to those residents through many ways. And it's quite revolutionary. Often when we think about revolution, we think about guns, right? We don't think about words. We don't think about hope and imagination that comes through the narratives of a community. And that's what my friends and I are trying to change. And so how do we do that? How are we going to make these people's lives better in the tray? What can we do? How is telling better stories revolutionary, and how is it revolutionizing this community? Well, I can talk about what I do. Like, I work with children, and children love telling stories, and they love talking about themselves. Perfect. This is what I do. I go into the schools, and I go into community centers in the tray, and I work with students on telling stories about themselves. They talk about happy moments in their lives, and they talk about things that they love about themselves. And I call this process affirmation journaling, right? We teach it to the educators in the schools and in the community centers there. Because unfortunately, a lot of times in areas that are stricken with poverty, parents are very busy surviving. And so there isn't as much time as we would like for them to affirm their children. And so it's through these children telling their stories that they are able to take part in their own affirmation, and for us to affirm them as well. So when little black girls come to me and they say, oh, Miss Josie, I like my hair, I can say, oh, your hair is so beautiful. And when little black boys come to me and say, I love to draw, and I like science, and I like math, I can tell them how brilliant they are. And it's revolutionary. And it teaches them that their stories are important, and that they are important, their lives are important, and that they're here, and it gives them voice. And that translates into them becoming more productive members of the community. Now, telling stories isn't always a fun thing, and sometimes even being witness to the telling of stories is a very difficult thing to do. My experience with that came as a professor giving my students narrative prompts where they would write about their lives. And at the beginning of the semester, I always kind of do these diagnostic writing prompts where I ask them, tell me about an experience that you've had that has been life-changing, right? And so I was surprised when I received a lot of these essays back, and a lot of young women in my classes chronicled their experiences with sexual abuse. It was a very sad day. I was reading these essays, just snotting and crying. It was horrible. And I had to think about myself as a storyteller and also as a witness of the telling of stories in that moment, and what I could do to make those moments of them sharing their stories and providing that outlet, how could I help them heal through it? I guess I shouldn't have been surprised when I read the essays, because 1 out of every 6 women in America will be a victim of some type of sexual assault or sexual violence. And so I began working with counselors to work on this idea of telling stories, to create narrative projects where these women could not only tell the stories about their experiences with sexual abuse, but also how they survived them, and also how they move forward in their lives. And it took them away from being victims, right? And it also gave them space to share things that a lot of us normally don't. And I never would have expected to read those essays, but it taught me that a lot of times, contrary to what we're taught or what we believe, women want to talk about those things. And so being witness there and creating these narrative projects really has helped these young women heal. And it's a project that is ongoing that I work with counselors in the community with. And I also work with some great visual artists in the community who do these wonderful public art projects. I grew up in a lower middle class family. You know, my family, my parents were working folk. And so, as I said earlier, they were very busy with supporting the family, and so we didn't have an opportunity to go to museums and these types of things. And so in Third Ward, what we're doing is we're creating these public art spaces, and there's one that's called the Beauty Box, where these two local artists, Robert Hodge and Philip Powell, have recreated these sort of living spaces of these antique African-American homes, right? And so you get to see this antique furniture and those old floor model television sets and the picture of JFK and MLK together. And it's a public art space, so everyone in the community can come through whenever they want. And it is a testament of the legacy of Third Ward. It connects the current residents to the past. And we also do various programming. We do film screenings. And I contribute a sort of narrative aspect as well, where we have people from the community come in and tell stories about their lives and their parents' lives and their great-great-grandparents' lives and whoever has settled in the community. And it is a great way to position community there. It makes everybody feel like this is home, and this is a home worth fighting for, and this is a home worth talking about, and it's very important. Work there. And there are several other artists, particularly a collective of women, My Girls, who are doing this sort of same storytelling with different means. Actually, my friend Regina Agu, for instance, just won the 2014 Idea Fund for a project that she's working on called Friends of Angela Davis Park, where she is working with Angela Davis Park, which was established in 2012 to sort of respond to the way the communities are changing in Houston, and also to introduce to its residents these sort of revolutionary Americans in their lives. And part of the programming that they have in this Friends of Angela Davis Park is their martial arts programs there where people in the community can learn martial arts. And there's also this storytelling of radical Americans, revolutionary Americans, that guides the community to realize that, you know, revolution begins with self. And we can all take part in our own personal revolutions, in revolutionizing our communities and our cities and our states and our country and the world, right? And so it's wonderful. And so this is what me and some of my great friends are doing to make the revolution irresistible in Houston. It is something that we're doing through the efforts of telling stories, and we have every great faith that it is going to transform the Tray and the city and the world. Thank you.